Alright, so just as a heads up, this video is going to be a bit unconventional. I'm going to be discussing my philosophy regarding content creation and the fitness industry, and while it won't be directly beneficial to how you train in the current moment, it will be an overarching beneficial philosophy for you to hear that I do believe will be thought-provoking. So if that interests you, stick around. If not, feel free to click away. I wanted to mention Barbell Apparel. Check them out. Look at that t-shirt I'm wearing. Absolutely hugging the sleeves. You can check the link in my description if you want to shop my collection and get one of those shirts for yourselves. With that said, let's get into the video for today. One of the trends I hate seeing in the fitness industry is how quick people are to outsource their thinking to content creators. We all know how it goes when you get into lifting or any interest for that matter, where it's easy to surrender your critical thinking to someone who positions themselves as an expert, cites sources that you don't have access to, or intentionally flaunts their qualifications. After all, if results are your top priority, how can you not give in to the temptation to turn off your brain in exchange for results that you desperately want? The reason the stuff that actually matters doesn't get discussed is due to cognitive dissonance. Have you wondered why everyone knows what foods are healthy, but restaurants only serve calorically dense food loaded with saturated fats and sodium? It's the same concept in a different context here. I almost empathize with some content creators because no matter how often you tell someone something, it's impossible to override their cognitive dissonance until the viewer has a breakthrough moment themselves. How many times have you heard someone say you need to train harder in a video? And why do you never train harder after watching it? Oh, is it because you're already training hard enough, but you don't even film your sets, let alone consistently? How did I know you don't film your sets when I don't even know who you are? And how did I know that the reason you don't film your sets is because you think you already train hard enough simply because it feels hard? And how did I know that if you were to film your sets, you'd train harder in front of the camera, proving that you could have been training harder this whole time? So I can understand why some content creators refuse to beat the dead horse and talk about stuff that'll make them money instead, even if it doesn't help anyone. I don't necessarily have an issue with that. The problem is when these content creators become trend stalkers, trend magnets, whatever you want to call it. Then it becomes selfish. No matter how innocent Jeff Nippard might act in his videos, he's an entrepreneur first and foremost, and his goal is to make money. Just something to keep in mind when you're watching content for someone like him, Renaissance Periodization, Athlete X, etc., really any of these big channels. The key to making legit progress in bodybuilding isn't necessarily having a high ceiling, it's having a high floor. This is the difference between a content creator that helps further you and someone who will inevitably hold you back. When I mention a high floor, I'm referring to a training philosophy that can stand the test of trends and fads. When you look at Jeff Nippard, what is his floor? What is the floor of his channel? If you go to his content now, it's about natural versus enhanced lifters. A year ago, it was about getting shredded. The year before that, it was about lengthened partials. Before that, it was about high frequency. Where is the consistent lens that training is viewed from in that content? And although I am critical of Jeff's approach to content, he is a science communicator, so some of this is to be expected, and I can't be too critical of that. I just think that if you are to primarily follow that type of content for a while, you'd end up basically where you started, and your floor of knowledge will remain low despite knowing a few fun facts about random lifting topics here and there. When you need to use your critical thinking, which is and will always be a common occurrence in your lifting career if you actually want to go far, you have nowhere to go. What lens are you viewing training through? You're just limited to being aware of what the current fad is. I'm not trying to self-promote, but for anyone who's been following my channel for a bit, you'll have a far better understanding of not just what to do or what the current trends are, but you'll be able to use my philosophy as a filter for decision making that can apply to nearly anything lifting related. I'm not even saying that my training philosophy is the best, I'm just saying that it actually is something tangible that you can use. If you need to make a decision on exercise selection, technique, volume, rep ranges, etc., I'm not telling you to do some random gimmicky lift with an esoteric explanation that has no correlation to anything else. I'm telling you to do preacher curls because of the opposing force of the pad, allows you to get as close as you can to your potential maximum force output. The descending resistance profile allows for a max effort concentric that has a clear lockout for simplified progression tracking and matches the intraset fatigue accumulation related to the muscle length, and it challenges the biceps when they have the best leverage. Notice how that philosophy of exercise selection can apply to other lifts for other muscle groups, and it can compete against any fad that comes along. So you have an actual foundation to your approach, and as new trends come along, you can allow the useless ones to pass you by, and the useful ones can be implemented where possible. And you'll make gains the whole time, by the way. Think about it for a second. What are you searching for? Are you looking for like a magic tip that'll finally unlock your gains? Or are you endlessly searching for a video that you're hoping is the final piece of the puzzle to understanding how lifting works, only to be disappointed or more confused after watching that video? When you got into lifting content, in all likelihood, you were looking for a comprehensive guide to lift and make progress, only to be slowly brought down to waiting for this big secret from the big YouTube channel to finally be revealed. The content that you'll see among the more popular fitness channels or on the YouTube homepage is all about how to have this hypothetical higher ceiling. It's all about the current trend or what little hack might finally unlock the gains you've been waiting to make. The problem is this content lacks comprehension and each video is seemingly random. For example, if you were to try and guess what the next Renaissance periodization video is about, what do you think the odds of you getting that right would be? It seems like a lot of these bigger channels, they prey on your low floor of knowledge, feeding you little pieces of a puzzle that ultimately never connect to paint a bigger picture. That's what I mean about a low floor, especially of knowledge. That's what I'm talking about here. These channels keep you confused on purpose. It's literally in their best interest. The same thing can be applied to Instagram or TikTok or really any short form content. Even the science-based creators, they aren't actually science-based. They might start off that way, but they've always become trend-based, as Paul Carter said, and I have to give him credit for it because I think he's spot on with that assessment. When you understand the intentions of content creators, the ultimate decision comes down to you and what approach you want to take to your training philosophy. How do you balance dogmatism and skepticism? If you've noticed, I'm actually a good bit of both, and I'll explain why. I believe the fairly strong degrees of dogmatism are actually required in order to make progress. Training comes down to effort, obsession, technical proficiency, and consistency. If you're so unbiased that you don't believe your current approach to training is the best, you'll be less satisfied with your approach and you'll hold less faith in yourself. It's like the kid in the candy shop analogy. This is even a study, I believe. If a kid goes into a candy shop and can choose one of 10 different types of candy, he'll be less satisfied with his choice than if he just got to get the same type of candy at a store with more limited options. The same concept applies to training. If you really sit and think things through, you'll ultimately find that one approach will stick out to you most. We've all got life experience here. Do we trust authority, our own opinions, history, your friends, social proof? You'll find all training methods are backed by some form of evidence, and it's up to you to pick which is best. For example, if I wasn't thinking critically, I'd think that deep stretch was more important than time-tested methods natural bodybuilders have used for decades. And this is purely due to marketing and how the message is packaged, as well as our own cognitive dissonance. When you see a jacked natural lifter going all out on hack squats, that looks painful, and so you want to avoid it, or at least keep an open mind as to how there might be a way around needing to do that. So when the video about the secret, new, trendy quad exercise comes out, it's easy to fall victim to that because the more instantly appealing authority behind it. Think about it. That video is created by someone who has some form of authority, flaunts their qualifications regardless of the relevancy, and the view count on the video displays a sense of social proof. And to top it off, you can relax and consume and hope you're told the secret you've been waiting for since being brainwashed by content creators in the first place. And it becomes clear when you compare the reasoning for your beliefs rather than the beliefs themselves. Separate the title, the thumbnail, the authority, the view count, and all the general social hype from the lift itself or whatever topic is being discussed. Now that lift on the temporary pedestal is some variation of knee extension. Now compare that to the other variation of knee extension, which comes with history and real social proof in terms of results on its side. The latter is boring in how it's packaged, but when you put them on neutral grounds for debate, the one you truly believe in will become clear. So when you listen to my videos, don't just take it at face value, actually compare my approach to others and see which makes more sense. I try to make everything as complete and comprehensive as possible, and I do my best to exemplify that in how I train. When you hear me discussing my training philosophies, they're built on what I believe to be most important, and if you held a gun to my head or put me in a lie detector, my answers wouldn't change. Training methods that work are already known for the most part. I believe that to be true. I don't believe there are any other major variables or methods that are still undiscovered. However, I do believe we can still refine our understanding and comprehension of how training works, and I believe we have more to discover or uncover. That's why I'm hesitant to jump on bandwagons like the deep stretch, lengthened partials, or even ultra low volumes. The perspective I have is that we've found things that work, but the principles and patterns aren't fully recognized. I ask myself questions like, why is the bench press stuck around, but nothing has stood the test of time or has that place in its own hierarchy from muscle groups like the triceps, delts, or traps? Is it because people care more about their pecs? Is it because there's something unique about the bench press that you can't or we haven't yet replicated in other lifts? Is it because of the social status created from benching heavy and that there simply isn't room for other lifts to creep in or other lifts aren't found to be as impressive by us? I sit on these thoughts and come to my own conclusions. You might wonder why I'm such a big fan of preacher curls. Here's a peek into how I became a fan of them using the bench press as an example with my previous questions. Why has the bench press stuck around, but nothing has stood the test of time or has that place in its own hierarchy for muscle groups like the triceps, delts, or traps? My answer to this would be the bench press has the ultimate progressive overload potential. Not because it's a barbell, but because there's a direct opposing force, which allows for infinite strength progression with no room for technique deviation unless you willingly do so. The next question would be, is it just because people care more about their pecs? I've always wondered if the bench is the chicken or the egg. Do people care about their pecs and that's why bench is popular? Or do people care about their pecs because the bench is popular and plays into your status as a lifter? I do think it's a bit of both, but clearly there's benefit to having a lift where you can display or test strength in a standardized fashion, so that would be useful to embrace something similar for other muscle groups. Next question would be, is it because there's something unique about the bench press that you can't or we haven't yet replicated in other lifts? My answer for this is the bench press is lengthened bias and has a descending resistance profile. Notice how the lifts that have a clear lockout are the most popular over the course of history. I noticed there are 3 reasons for this. The first reason is that challenging the muscle in a lengthened position seems to be highly potent for growth. The second is that progression is easily monitored over time due to the clear lockout, and that strength can be easily compared to others to see how you're doing in a broad sense. The third reason is because it allows for slow, grindable reps because it gets easier as you press, which matches the moment arm to the level of fatigue the muscle is dealing with at various lengths. In other words, it's hard where you're strong and it's easy where you're weak. And the final question I have here is it because the social status created from benching heavy and there simply isn't room for other lifts to creep in or other lifts aren't found to be as impressive by ourselves? I do think part of it is being able to lift heavy and the inevitable status that comes with it, since it's a proof of things like discipline, effort, along with other valuable and desirable traits. If the strength ceiling is lower on preacher curls than it is on bench in terms of absolute weight, how do we bring status to preacher curls as an incentive to grow your biceps? Does it need to be related directly to the lift, or can we test these traits through arm measurements? And then preacher curls would be the path to that achievement. I know this video is a bit unconventional, but I genuinely hope it gives you some food for thought as far as your perspective on the fitness industry goes. It shouldn't be overwhelming to learn new things. It should be exciting and interesting, and you can use those as proxies when you consume content in the future.